Let's go to line number one and speak with the member for Humber Valley, also the leader of the official opposition, Mr. Dwight Ball. Hello, Dwight, you're on the air. Hello, Dwight.
Yeah, first of all, Patty, I want to, we'll talk about the numbers, I guess, in terms of Mr. Kennedy's comments yesterday. But before I do, I'd like to mention the youth parliament that's occurring today in the House of Assembly, and we're fortunate to have, some of our brightest in the House today and debating, I guess, 3 important resolutions on their order paper. And I had an opportunity this morning to bring greetings to the group, and it's certainly refreshing and encouraging to see our youth involved in the political process.
I agree, and there was comments offered last night at the Harbour Centre about whether or not we should have civics classes reintroduced to the classroom and lower the voting age to 16. My comment was, hey, an engaged 16-year-old is infinitely more valuable to our process than the whiner 56-year-old who doesn't vote and just takes himself out of the loop. So I totally agree. One thing, though, Dwight, weren't they debating the privatization of Nalcor today?
Well, they were. Yeah, they were. It was Muskrat Falls and the privatization of Nalcor. They're also debating electoral reform. Yeah. And, proportionate representation, and also on their order paper they had about some patent laws in Canada, those sorts of things. So it was interesting, but yes, privatization of Nalcor was one of the subjects they were debating.
Right on. Hopefully they have included the concept of the loan guarantee inside that to poo-poo the idea.
I think so. It was a government resolution, so I found it'd be interesting debate to watch, I'm sure.
Dwight, so I wish them well, as you can imagine, because I see the engagement of all as key. No longer can we be disillusioned or disengaged because of government or opposition spin. The power's in our hands.
Absolutely.
My point. Go ahead now, Dwight, the deficit or project the deficit numbers.
Yeah, well, first of all, when this came as a bit of a surprise, so early on the eve, I guess, of the budget consultations that are occurring today in Carbonear. So, first of all, some of the questions that I would like to ask is actually what is making up those numbers. Certainly is the remaining equity position of Muskrat Falls. Is this a part of what we're seeing here? And, of course, the commitments and the responsibilities that we have in the next few years as it relates to other projects that, to satisfy our equity responsibilities, through Nalcor. So these are questions, that I would like to see answered right now, because it will affect, what decisions you would. Of course, what did they use for the price of oil? Because obviously there was a revenue line that was generated to suggest that those $1.6 billion deficits will occur, but we need to establish, what numbers they use to generate the revenue line.
I agree with that, but isn't the price of a barrel of oil and Muskrat Falls, aren't they just little pieces of why we're in a deficit position? Because Muskrat Falls, suppose you use all the cash on hand that would be used for equity in Muskrat Falls, throw it all at the deficit, we're still in a deficit position where we outspend our revenues. So therein lies the problem for me. I think the Muskrat Falls is one of those thin, enrage the electorate type of words being used. Isn't that fair?
Absolutely, it is, Patty. And there's a number of things that that actually put us in this situation. You need to look no further than the CNLOPB website, and they will tell you, what you would forecast in terms of volume and for our oil production. So we knew that oil production would fall off. We've known this for years. So what the red flag for me would have been is that you better make sure that you plan for the future properly. And this government really has not done that. They've known we'd be in this situation. With oil, of course, the price of oil was a separate concern, and so was currency. But the volume it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. We've known that for quite some time.
We have, and so how do you approach it if you're the opposition party? It's easy enough to say, and we're going to hear it. We're going to hear Muskrat Falls, we're going to hear Bill 29, we're going to hear all that stuff, when in fact I'm not so sure that plays a major role in deficit positions we find ourselves in. But also tough, and this is my own opinion, top of my head, for opposition parties, to run against the Tories and say, hey, you're touting yourself as good fiscal managers, but here's where we find ourselves. That's one thing. But then to put forward your own ideas, which necessarily do have to have a dollar figure amount attached to it, becomes a very tricky thing. Now, all of a sudden we'll be looking at a ballot that says, what's this party going to cut? What's that party going to cut? What's this party going to cut? As opposed to what you can all offer. It is a tough spot for opposition parties, is it not?
No question, and we need to be challenged, and that's what this is all about, because one of what we do here is that we challenge government and we keep governments accountable, because at some point we want to be government. And so your actions are always louder than your words. But one thing for me, as I know, is that I've seen this government, for instance, they've got bigger in size, they've increased the size of government, and on the other end they're expecting people to, suggest that there would be less services or less services provided for the people of the province. So you can't be both. If you really want to be true leaders, you can't be increasing the size of government and on the other end saying that people should expect more or should expect less. It's not the way it works. And so the change actually starts right there. We had to find a way to operate government more efficiently.
Smaller government is de facto cutting jobs in the public service, whether that be hundreds or thousands, and also attention to their pension and attention to their wage demands. So as a Liberal Party, do you think that is a necessary part of controlling spending, is to deal with the public service layoffs are imminent? And what else would the Liberal Party do to control spending?
The expenditures are always a piece of it. You can't always rely on revenue. I mean, revenue would include simply just increasing taxes or pumping more oil or doing whatever it takes to drive your revenue line. It's not, the answer to this is not always, will not always be satisfied by the revenue line. You had to put sustainable practices in place in your expenditures. And what we've done here in the last few years, I'm not here to argue that we've got to have less wages, but we do need less people. And that's the way, this government has actually added people. It's not the public sector's fault that this government went out and hired more people, and now we find ourselves that, it's not sustainable.
It's not their fault, but it is the reality. It's like I said, if we all of a sudden flipped the Confederation building upside down and yourselves with the NDP were running the government tomorrow, sure, it wouldn't change the financial position of the province. So therein lies the trick with dealing with the public sector and other things. Dwight, I also said off the top of the show that when it comes to cost and the attempt to control cost, the number one hurdle and problem facing any government of any stripe in this province is rural Newfoundland. Yeah. People demand and expect services just like they were living in the heart of town, and you can't begrudge them because that's reality. Their X is every bit as important as mine. How do we control the expectations and the delivery of service from rural Newfoundland, knowing that sometimes that's as fiscally irresponsible as anything government has ever done?
Yeah. There's no question that if you live in rural Newfoundland, there are basic services that you would expect, and that's no different. I mean, first of all, you define, I guess, what rural is, and I did speak to a rural development association on Friday night, and we had a great discussion on this, because there are basic services that we must provide. We can't provide every single service. I mean, for me to sit here and talk to you today and expect that we're going to have schools in every single community in this province, or we're going to have large clinics, no, that's not going to happen. But we must make sure that we do whatever we can to explore all our options within. I look at 4 pillars. When I look at forestry, I look at the fishery, I look at agriculture, and I look at tourism. When it comes to rural Newfoundland and Labrador, these can have a tremendous impact. We can't be just duplicating all the things that we do in those particular areas and put that in every area. No, we can't do that. We know that. And so people, I believe, in rural Newfoundland, yes, they expect basic services, but there are a lot of things that people know that they like the lifestyle, they live there for a certain culture, and that there's certain things that they will live without and realize that they have to travel for.
It's the trickiest of all conversations. We can talk about potential program cuts, public service adjustments, or costs. How do you govern spending in rural Newfoundland? And that's a fair point you make. How do you define where and what rural Newfoundland is? And that's also a tricky part of the puzzle. But Dwight, I appreciate your call. Anything quickly in summary, sir?
Yes, I would. And I would say when rural Newfoundland and Labrador, one thing you don't do, if you want to stimulate rural Newfoundland and Labrador, you just don't go cutting your legs out from your economic development boards either. You need those around.
I couldn't agree more. And to think that government is going to be able to or responsible for diversifying the economy is also looking straight through the rose-colored glasses, because there's way more to it than that. Dwight, certainly appreciate your call today. Stay in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.